Every stone laid, every brick positioned, every beam erected represents just not a material, but also the dedication and the effort of countless individuals. It's not merely about building structures. It's about honoring the spirit and the effort behind each project. And presenting It's Time to Honor the Work is a gentleman who embodies this very sentiment. Please join me in welcoming the president of Chandos Construction, Mr. Tim Coldwell, and let's embark on a journey that pays tribute to the soul of our industry.
Thanks a lot. It's not often that I get a whole group of tech folks in a room, so I'm going to do something a little bit different. I am not going to talk about digital twins. I will talk a little bit about robotics, but I want to talk about the labor crisis that we have in this industry. I think far too often, folks in rooms like this forget about the severity of what we're facing as an industry. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're going to have a panel right after this that really talks about the labor crisis in the construction industry. Let me tell you a story about Kieran. She'd grown up in a family where everyone had a degree. As a young child, she knew her mom and her dad had set their sights on her getting a good job. Medicine and law topped the list, followed by engineering or business. As a young child, Kieran would spend all her free time building with Lego. She made towers that nearly touched the ceiling, stopping only when called for dinner or to practice piano. She relished the opportunity to take an idea in her mind and bring it to life. But as elementary school transitioned into junior high, the career talks at the kitchen table became more real and more serious. Arguments led to tear-stained faces. Kieran pleaded with her parents. Could she not explore other paths that suited her interests and how she learned? She knew her parents were not fulfilled in their work. Prestige and earning potential hadn't resulted in happiness. Her parents came home exhausted every day, putting in their time and counting the days until retirement. Kieran lost the battle. She applied to university and began a Bachelor of Science degree, but she was deeply unhappy. She didn't enjoy university classes. However, she didn't want to let her parents down. She spiraled into depression. She slept more and began missing classes. In her early 20s, graduating with a degree that she did not choose, she felt lost and without a future. One day, Kieran saw a poster for a free carpentry pre-apprentice program. The picture reminded her of building with Lego as a child. For the first time in years, she felt a spark inside. Kieran was never told about careers in the trades, nor were her parents. With nothing to lose and her voice quivering, she called the number on the poster. Soon, she found that she had a knack for joinery and was referred to a fine cabinet shop where she got to work in the shop and as an installer. There were many moments that challenged her confidence, but those feelings faded when she stood back and looked at her work at the end of the day. In the trades, Kieran had finally found a community of like-minded individuals. She now is a manager for a high-end millwork shop here in Toronto. At age 28, she's debt-free, owns her own truck, has health benefits and pension, and just purchased her first home. But what if Kieran had been introduced to the trades in elementary school when all her free time was spent building? And why was it a poster that stopped the downward spiral? This story plays itself over and over again, and it's done so for decades. It's clear that we're due for a change. We need parents, educators, and industry to rethink what a good job looks like. Today, I want to talk about honoring the work of people in the skilled trades and how the actions that we take as an industry can shape the careers valued by society and build the Canada that we all need. Our greatest challenge is people. The clean energy transition will create millions and millions of green jobs. And for some reason, we seem to think that those jobs are going to be in technology, as if an app is going to solve it all. Most of the green jobs being created are in the construction trades, and we don't have enough. There are 1.5 million people working in the Canadian construction industry, and a recent forecast from RBC suggests that 700,000 of those folks will retire by the year 2030. That's 46% of our industry that's going to go poof. And when was the last time that you talked to a 13-year-old kid who was excited to be a plumber or an electrician? Even worse, when was the last time that you talked to a helicopter parent who was excited when their kid came home and said that they wanted to have a career in the trades? It makes no sense knowing that tradespeople have extremely high job satisfaction and earn on average $25,000 more per year than the average person with an undergraduate degree. One of Bill Gates' favorite authors is Vaclav Smil, a professor at the University of Manitoba. Smil talks about how manufacturing is key to modern economics, modern economies. And he shows that countries that manufacture have societies that value tradespeople the same way they value doctors, lawyers, engineers, and accountants. I've had the opportunity to spend time with Smil myself. He's a prickly character, to say the least, and yet his message is profound. Check it out.
You people don't make anything anymore. This is a hyperbolic statement. I know quite well what you make, right? GE turbines for jetliners, and Longclays, whatever. But still, you abdicate it on such huge, vast range of manufacturers. It's unbelievable. And, isn't it, kind of correlated that of all the major Western economies, Germany, despite all the fact it has to buy all of its energy, still has a trade surplus? Because they have something to sell.
And why is that? What did Germany do right?
Because they think, in a way which Americans consider old-fashioned, that making stuff is absolutely essential for the health of the country and for the pride of the country and for the very survival of the society. They still believe, you people persuaded yourself that this is the e-world. Everything is just electrons flow, and if I design a new app, this is the future of the world. No, all of these things which you see around have to be manufactured, and all of them start fundamentally with steel and concrete, really, right? You still make your concrete, really, right? But, half of your steel comes from China now.
What did Germany do to actually retain a viable manufacturing sector that the U.S. did not do?
Very simple. They don't push every kid through high school and through university. They let them apprentice to become masters of everything by age 18, right? I mean, when I went to school, classical German system, when we finished the grade school, maybe 20% of us went to high school, using American terms, right? And after we finished high school, maybe 10% of us went to university, right? Most of the kids departed at age 14, 15. I was born in Plzeň, in Pilsen, right? Big Škoda works, right? So biggest engineering concern in Europe. So most of the kids I've known at age 13, 15, they just went to Škoda works. And by age 18, 19, they could build a locomotive, streetcar, gun, you name it.
So how did we get here? Well, with each industrial revolution, there's been a change in education. In the late 1700s, master artisans migrated from rural areas to cities, creating an industrial society. The predictable career of following in the family footsteps disappeared. Modern education began with learning by rote. The second industrial revolution occurred in the late 1800s with the commercialization of electricity. The education model again shifted, resembling something more similar to today's age-graded classrooms designed to mass produce kids with standardized abilities for reading, writing, and arithmetic. An increase in standardized tests followed in the early 1900s, but the teachers of the 1920s through the 1940s pushed back and focused on learning by doing. It was this style of teaching that was blamed for math and science gaps that were actually the result of the Great Depression and the Second World War. In 1957, the first man-made satellite was launched and orbited Earth. The Soviet education system had created the scientists and engineers, which led to Sputnik's success. This event made it clear that a U.S. educational reform was needed, and scientists were given the reins. Those scientists weren't necessarily interested in practical problems, like how does a refrigerator work? The focus was on academic pursuits that would ultimately land a man on the moon. Gone was an educational model that served to connect with students in a personal way. Some have gone so far as to say that education in the 1950s and 60s lost its humanity. This is when the stigma of work in the trades began. 60 years later, we're facing our own Sputnik moment. But this time we aren't racing to land on the moon. We're racing to address our climate crisis while preparing people for a rapidly changing workforce. Education reform is again required. But there's more to this than education reform. I've gotten to know Senator Omavar over the years. She helped found the Century Initiative, a national nonpartisan charity that's on a mission to responsibly grow the population of Canada to 100 million by the year 2100. Check it out.
Canada, the true north, strong and free. We're not just poutine and maple syrup. We're breathtaking natural landscapes, crackling bonfires and northern lights. We're athletes and scientists, artists and explorers. We're innovators, making a mark on the world. Spanning 10 million square kilometers, we're the second largest landmass, but our population is only 38 million. That's a whole lot of space for not a lot of people. And this small population is getting older. Nearly 300,000 Canadians are retiring every year, which means our workforce is shrinking. On top of that, we're not having kids like we used to. Our fertility rate is low, and with a global pandemic, it will drop even lower. All of this means we're way behind where we need to be, because our quality of life is tied to the size of our population. You see, if we had more people, we would have more economic activity and a bigger workforce. That means more potential tax dollars, which we could use to create more sustainable cities and improve social services like affordable housing, green transportation, and that free healthcare we're always talking about. Plus, we would reinforce our reputation as an open and diverse society, giving us a more powerful voice on the world stage. But population growth doesn't happen overnight. We need long-term thinking, a vision, and a plan. That's what we do. Century Initiative is paving the way for policy change that leads to prosperity. We've crunched the numbers, and we know that by the year 2100, we need 100 million people to achieve the quality of life we want. That means we need to grow our population now by supporting Canadians who want to have kids and by welcoming immigrants who help us drive Canadian business and innovation. Let's do what we already know how to do. Learn from the past and think differently about the future. Let's create a bigger, bolder Canada.
Part of why I'm so focused on population growth is the number one predictor of construction activity is population growth. It's an exact correlation. So think about it. We're talking about building 3 times as much stuff that exists in this country in the next 80 years. Just let that sink in. There's a great book entitled Nomad Century by Gaia Vince. It contains a stat that continues to floor me, and it's that several reputable forecasts from around the globe suggest that 3 billion people will move as a result of climate change this century. Where are those folks going to want to go? I've got my money on Canada. Let's zoom in and just look at Ontario over the next 10 years. This is a rough estimate of the social infrastructure required just in Ontario for a population growth of 3 million. And just to be clear, numerous folks believe that 3 million population growth within a decade is quite conservative for Ontario. 1,500 schools, hundreds of rec centers and emergency facilities, and 1.5 million homes. If there's 300 units in a condo tower, that's 5,000 condo towers within 10 years. Who's going to build this stuff if we don't encourage trades careers with our youth while increasing immigration? The preceding figures don't include the commercial and industrial projects that go with that population increase. Residential is about 60% of the construction market, so add, say, 40% more to what was on that slide. This doesn't address the Ontario infrastructure deficit, which is estimated to be $50 billion. And it does not address the cost of the clean energy transition in Canada. RBC suggests that it'll cost $2 trillion to transition Canada to a net zero economy by 2050. Who does that transition work? It's mostly tradespeople. This is the most recent research in construction productivity. There's a lot of talk from politicians these days about decreasing the cost of housing by increasing housing supply. That will not work unless we can reverse decades of declining productivity in the construction sector. CMHC defines affordable housing as no more than 30% of before-tax household income used for housing. This equates to $2,300 per month for the average household in Canada. And that $2,300 figure needs to support hard construction costs, land, permits, levies, taxes, development profit, etc. There's just not enough meat on the bone to make most housing deals work. The dirty little secret is that decades of declining construction productivity has made it difficult to make projects pencil. Yes, government needs to fast-track permits, reduce taxes, and optimize development fees, but we in this industry have got to fix our productivity woes. And just to be clear, I should just preface this. Much of the conversation in the technology world revolves around site-level productivity improvements, and I think that's great. But if you can't scale that up to the company level, it doesn't matter. So as an example, Chandos does $800 million of revenue. We have 800 employees. That ratio of one full-time employee per million of revenue has been very static in our organization for 20 years. We've got the folks from DPR here. They're doing 10 billion of revenue and they got 10,000 employees. It's the same ratio. That ratio has been stuck for 20 years. The real benefits and the real reduction in construction costs happens when Chandos Construction can do $1 billion of revenue with 800 employees. That's when housing costs come down. That's when the real benefits of productivity increases occur out in the industry. And I think we need to shift the focus from the job site level to the company level and start to think about optimizing the entire company. But to make a point here, 30 years ago, a GC like Chandos needed a team of 3 salaried people to manage a $30 million housing project. Today, that same project costs $60 million and requires a GC team of 6 salaried people to manage. It seems like we need twice as many people to build the same building. Now, granted, the buildings are more complex today, but still, twice as much, twice as many people. There are many who say technology will solve the labor crisis. That old chestnut just isn't true. In fact, there's evidence that technology does not kill jobs. It changes the nature of the jobs. Here's a clip from Avatar.
Good to meet you, Colonel. Heard good things. A lot's changed since your last tour here. Walk with me. The new ops center is over here. That just came online. These swarm assemblers, they can put up a building in 6 days. We have done more here in a year than in the previous 30 years. We're not here to run a mine, Colonel. As on-world commander, I have been charged with a greater mission.
I actually believe that some of what you see there is in the future for our industry. But that doesn't mean we need less tradespeople. All it means is that those tradespeople shift their work to a different part of the supply chain and their jobs will change. Instead of being on site in the mud and the snow, they're off-site working on prefab components and assembly solutions. None of that happens without tradespeople. Here's an example from a Chandos project. All but one person in this photo are tradespeople. And you know what they're working on? They're building robots. And they're building robots that are being used in the manufacturing industry. That same group of folks is building a robot to handle radioactive material on a project that Chandos is doing. Check this out.
And how many people will be running these?
I think they're training about 4 or 5 people, I think, something like that, right? But basically, obviously, one at a time, because that's it. But the way they train them as well is they were getting them to pick up a cup of water and pouring it into a bucket.
We have the know-how in our industry. In fact, our local construction associations all have young builders groups that, when combined, have thousands of eager young people across the country who want to make a dent in the world. And what if we got those folks into schools and had them tell kids about careers in the trades? We can address our labor crisis as an industry by working together. ACE mentoring from the United States is a great example of what is possible when industry is mobilized. Each year, ACE works with over 10,000 kids in the US and are now just launching a pilot project with the Toronto District School Board. I actually think it's in its 4th year. Imagine what could happen if the young builders groups of our local construction associations partnered with ACE. There are many great organizations that promote trades across Canada. They focus on junior and senior high students or adult upgrading. And it's been my experience as a leader that many of these organizations are unaware of each other. And one of the challenges is that there's no central hub that links them all together. My spouse, Angela, is an award-winning high school science teacher. She's always talked about research from Don Sutherland at the University of Winnipeg. The research demonstrates that the best time to expose kids to career options is elementary school. And what if elementary kids were exposed to careers in the trades? So Angie decided to start an Ontario not-for-profit to help teachers and parents of elementary-age children discover careers in the trades. And I should be very clear, Honor the Work is not affiliated with Chandos. Angie does not receive any form of compensation, and we are not looking to recover startup costs. There's a website that connects the trade advocacy organizations across the country together in a single hub for teachers, kids, and parents. Honor the Work is using social media to connect directly with parents. The social media team averages about 20,000 views per post as of late, and we believe we can increase that figure exponentially. The target audience is parents who know nothing about the trades and who are dissatisfied with their jobs and want something better for their children. The new Ontario curriculum for grades 1 to 7 includes learner outcomes for the trades. To support this, Honor the Work has developed teacher resource kits that include lesson plans and handouts. The kits also contain materials for hands-on activities and a dozen books per classroom. Honor the Work will have these kits in 74 elementary classrooms in Ontario within a few weeks. Industry partnerships and government support will allow this to be scaled up, and the goal is to get these kits into roughly 2,000 elementary classrooms in Ontario within the next 3 years. It's clear that government, industry, and the nonprofit sector can work together for the collective good. This idea of a collective approach is near and dear to my heart. Some of you may know my own personal story. I'm a member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte, and Chandos is the largest Indigenous-led contractor in Canada. I did not grow up in community, but would not be here today if it weren't for the scholarship I earned from my community. And I would not be here today if Chandos hadn't given me an opportunity when I needed it the most. A few years ago, I heard about Bill C-344, which Senator Omavar was championing in the Senate. It connected directly with my story. So I got on the phone and called David LePage with Buy Social Canada. Over lunch, I told David my story, and David told me that social procurement was a way to encourage contractors to do what Chandos did for me when I needed a chance. Soon afterwards, I spoke with industry groups that were opposed to social procurement. They said, "How dare government force us to hire those people? Women, Indigenous, New Canadians, LGBTQ, and visible minorities." They said, "If you force us to hire those people, you're forcing us to hire from an inferior labor pool, and it'll cost the taxpayers more." Yes, they actually said that out loud, and it was the most racist and sexist thing I've heard in a very long time. And I thought to myself, do we really think that the Syrian refugee or the Indigenous mom seeking a better life for her children will do less work than the person we would have hired otherwise? The answer was an unequivocal no. And in fact, I thought about my own personal experience and knew that the person who was given a chance would likely outperform those who felt entitled. Since then, I've worked to promote social procurement as one of the solutions to our labor crisis. Today, there are over 100 entities embracing social procurement in Canada. Challenges persist, notably in the form of project labor agreements, which exclude businesses owned by members of equity-seeking groups from work unless they're signatory to a particular union. Most subcontractors owned by members of equity-seeking groups are small or medium enterprises that pay a living wage. We call on government, the private sector, and labor unions to amend their agreements to not exclude these groups. This gives entrepreneurs a seat at the table. And I wonder what we could do if we all use the power of our supply chain for good. In my view, Monty McNaughton is doing an excellent job as the Minister of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development in Ontario. Enrollment in the trades programs in Ontario is up by 24% in the last year as more people decide to pursue rewarding careers in the skilled trades. And yet, we in industry can do more. Our industry associations can mobilize thousands of volunteers to do school outreach. We can address violence in the world by providing jobs to refugees who are fleeing war-torn countries. Our businesses can partner with trades advocacy organizations across the country. And we can use social procurement to create hundreds of thousands of apprenticeships for members of equity-seeking groups. Owners, designers, and contractors can work together to fix our productivity problem. And we as individuals can volunteer with organizations like ACE Mentoring and work directly with kids. When I think about Kieran, I wonder why It took her so long to find her calling in the skilled trades. Think of what would have happened if she learned about carpentry in grade 5. How many kids are suffering with depression and anxiety because they're being pushed into something that's not for them? We can solve our labor crisis by working together. Your voice can make a huge difference. Many will talk about a leadership vacuum, but it's ready to be filled from the bottom up. We must honor and respect people who work with their hands. That's the future. That's the Canada that we need. Thank you.